FBA culture is not just vibrant, it is indestructible. Even when every institution in America, from housing to healthcare to education to employment, has been weaponized to keep us down, we continue to influence every corner of American culture, from music to sports to politics to fashion. We set the tone, the trend, and the rhythm of every society that once tried to wipe us out.
I told you that one black man's DNA just shattered everything you were taught about human history. What if I told you that Albert Perry, a quiet man from South Carolina, carried genetic code so ancient that it predates every known human being on Earth? And what if I told you that the moment scientists discovered this, they went completely silent? You're about to learn how one DNA test accidentally exposed the biggest lie in human history. This isn't just about genetics. This is about a cover-up so massive that it threatens to rewrite everything we know about race, evolution, and the true origins of humanity.
Let's define blackness for real. Let's really look at the definition of blackness here. Let's really unpack that, because he just said, as y'all saw, all the people who brought black pride to Africa was us. We were bringing black pride to Africa. Like I said, the Harlem Renaissance really defined blackness as a cultural identity, not just a skin tone. See, when people say, well, blackness is basically dark-skinned people of African descent. Okay. From a cultural standpoint, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about culture, lineage. We're tying everything together. See, the Harlem Renaissance, foundational Black Americans, they redefined blackness from just a term of degradation to a term of pride, artistic brilliance, cultural distinctiveness. All right? Thinkers, poets, musicians, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Duke Ellington, they infused black with unmistakable American cultural meaning, rooted in slavery, emancipation, and resilience. Okay? They were drawing from our experiences here. Black became a political term of resistance, born from the foundational Black American experience. Am I making sense, family? The foundational Black Americans intellectuals, they use black to express self-determination, racial pride, resistance to systematic racism. That was tied to the struggle here. Okay? Specifically from the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, not the immigrant experience. All right? So black, really, it came to symbolize the lineage of resistance native to the United States, not just any African ancestry. Okay? Black was reclaimed in America, not Africa, not the Caribbean. Black was reclaimed here. Black was reclaimed as a term of pride. That didn't originate in Africa or the Caribbean, even though there were terms like Kemet and Sudan. There were terms used to talk about certain lands and all of that. The term was used in certain parts of the Caribbean, but as a cultural sense of pride, we took a derogatory label and we turned it into a badge of honor. That was a uniquely American transformation that foundational Black Americans did. Right?
Rare African lineages. Could it be coincidence? Or was Albert Perry's ancient DNA a living link to a forgotten population that existed in both Africa and the Americas long before anyone was supposed to cross the Bering Strait? That's when the whispers started. If Perry's chromosome predated the so-called first Americans, and if his DNA resembled markers found in ancient American bones, then someone had to ask the forbidden question. Were black people the first Americans too? Not migrants, not slaves, but originators. And that single possibility was enough to shake the foundation of anthropology, archaeology, and everything we thought we knew about human history. So what did they do? They buried it. They called it an anomaly. They labeled it an outlier. They published it in obscure journals that most people would never read. But Albert Perry wasn't the glitch in their system. He was the key to unlocking the truth. Let's talk about what Albert Perry's DNA really means. His Y chromosome sits at what scientists call the basal position of the human family tree. That means it doesn't descend from anything we know. It precedes everything. While most people believe humanity slowly walked out of Africa into Europe and Asia, Perry's lineage suggests something far more revolutionary. Because DNA doesn't move alone, it migrates with people. And ancient black people didn't just migrate, they explored. There's growing evidence that ancient seafarers from Africa reached the shores of the Americas thousands of years before Columbus ever dreamed of a voyage. Ancient Egyptian texts describe lands to the west. African ships have been found buried off the Brazilian coast. Pre-Columbian artifacts in Mexico and the Mississippi mirror African spiritual symbols. All of it points to a black presence in the Americas that predates the very concept of Native American and completely destroys the lie that we were only brought here in chains. So where does Albert Perry fit? His DNA is the smoking gun, a 338,000-year-old African genetic marker sitting quietly in the veins of a black man in South Carolina. What are the odds? Unless his ancestors were already here, unless they were among the first to carry the fire of civilization across the seas. The Olmec civilization in Mexico is one of the oldest in the Americas, known for colossal stone heads with unmistakably African features, thick lips, wide noses, and braided hair. For decades, scholars dismissed these as artistic interpretation. But what if those statues weren't art? What if they were portraits of the black rulers who walked these lands before the Aztecs, the Mayans, or the Incas? Then there's the Ouachita Nation, a little-known group of black Native Americans who claim to be the oldest continuous civilization in North America. They built mound cities and established trade networks across the Mississippi Valley long before any Europeans touched the soil. And guess where Albert Perry was from? South Carolina, a region once heavily occupied by the Yamasee, another black Native American tribe that mysteriously disappeared from history after resisting colonization. Many Yamasee were enslaved not as Africans, but as indigenous people. Their records were erased, their tribes absorbed, their bloodlines renamed. But DNA doesn't lie. When you trace the unique ancient Y DNA markers in African Americans today, particularly those from South Carolina, Georgia, and the Deep South, you find genetic fingerprints that match pre-Columbian America. And Albert Perry's Y chromosome fits the pattern perfectly. It's as if his DNA was a survivor of genocide, not just of people, but of memory itself.
The primary function of a culture is not to amuse, but it is to ensure the continued existence of a group of people across generations. Shout out to A's Hole. You understand me? Culture is the operating system that helps a community adapt to and overcome adversity, to maintain social cohesion and transmit values, norms, and history, and a forged collective identity that builds resilience and purpose. We foundational Black Americans reject that shallow, commercialized interpretation of culture, of Black culture that dominates today, that we just about food and dance and all that twerking and whatnot. Look, FBA culture has never been about some sort of costume or pageantry. It's been about our survival. It has been about our resistance. It's been about making sure we live to see another day in a country designed to erase us. From the transatlantic slave trade to slavery, from Jim Crow to mass incarceration, from redlining to police brutality, foundational Black American culture was forged in fire.
Ancient Black people didn't just migrate, they mastered the seas. They were the original explorers, spiritual scientists, and earth architects. And the fact that this truth lives in Albert Perry's DNA means it lives in your DNA too. You are not an afterthought of history. You are its source code. You are living proof of a migration, a mastery, and a memory that predates every border, every book, and every colonial lie ever told. If Albert Perry had been a European man, his face would be on every history book cover. His DNA would be called a miracle of science. There would be documentaries, Nobel Prizes, and museum exhibits. Instead, silence. Because when the results came in showing a Y chromosome more ancient than all modern humans, the reaction wasn't celebration, it was fear. Albert Perry's DNA wasn't just science, it was revolutionary truth that threatened the very foundation of Western historical narratives. Think about it. If black men were here before anyone else, if we were the first humans, if we were the first Americans, then the entire story of civilization falls apart. It means we weren't just stolen from Africa, we were stolen from America too. It means African Americans aren't simply descendants of slaves, but descendants of ancient kings, architects, and navigators whose blood still holds the map of humanity. And that kind of truth terrifies those in power, because truth leads to questions. Questions lead to research. Research leads to proof. And proof leads to accountability. Imagine what would happen if millions of African Americans realized their roots in this land went deeper than Plymouth Rock, deeper than Native American treaties, deeper than European discovery, that their DNA didn't make them guests, it made them founders. Imagine the land claims, the cultural rights, the reparations, the education demands. Everything the system built on the lie that we were only brought here begins to crumble the moment the truth comes out. So instead of confronting the discovery, they dismissed it. They called Albert Perry's DNA genetic noise. They locked it behind academic paywalls and published it in language only experts could decode. But here's what they didn't count on: that the internet would remember, that people would dig, that this truth, once uncovered, would spread like wildfire. Because it only takes one spark. One man, one Y chromosome older than human memory. And suddenly, the world has to explain why everything we've been taught was a lie.
I can remember when I was a kid and be roasting with the fellas and roasting with the homies, and anytime they, you making jokes and they call me an African booty scratcher or some black Toby or boy. When we be joking, I used to say, you ninjas came on the bottom of the boat. My people came on top of it. We sailed here. We been here. But boy, oh boy, as an older man, did I know how right I was. It's just crazy going down this road and trying to figure out things in life's journey. But one of those things I know is we've been here. We've been here for a very long time. The powers that be just won't tell us. That's the definite truth. But somehow, some way, a little bit of the truth ekes out. And I'm here for it. Once again, it's your man Kris B. Subscribe to the channel. And we out.